Okay, folks, this is lecture number 15. We have an examination coming up in just about another week, too. Last time we were together, we were talking about Islam. Everything you wanted to know about Islam, about the Muslim faith here, and probably more than you wanted to know. And we're not quite through with that, as a matter of fact. I need to spend another 10 minutes on it, maybe. Mention to you about the founder of Islam, who was Muhammad. About Mecca, the Kaaba, Ramadan. I'll give you the dates of Ramadan in just a little bit anyway. The migration, it went to Yathrib. Yathrib today is known as Medina. This is called the Hijra. The 5 basic tenets of Islam. We also talked about the 5 pillars of Islam. Scriptures, Islamic scriptures, the Quran. And after the death of Muhammad, we'll see the first caliph, or caliph, if you want to pronounce it that way, who was Abu Bakr. We mentioned several others, too. I'll show you the names in just a few minutes here, of Umar and Uthman and Ali. And in the year 644, we had a sharp division within the Muslim faith. And we found that one group, it was a radical group, a militant group. They cause problems today. These are known as the Shia, or the Shiites. And we had the other group, which was a Sunnah, which was much less belligerent here. Alrighty, so anyway, and those were the topics that we talked about here. I want to go to my documents camera here, and there we go. And we're going to wrap up this section here on Islam. And one of the controversial things that we have today is that of Sharia law. Now, Sharia law, of course, is practiced, and it all depends to the severity of it. In places such as Iran, Afghanistan, it's very strictly enforced. In other areas like Egypt or in, say, Bosnia, it's not enforced anywhere near as tightly anyway. But I want to share some of this with you, and I want you to imagine this. Let's say that you're in Minnesota and Minneapolis, where we have a large presence of Muslims today, and you try to, and you're a practicing Muslim and a person heavily engaged in the belief of Sharia law, and let's try to blend this Sharia law with that of civil law today, and you can match it up to your community here. Theft of property. Theft of property, we amputate the right hand. Amputate the right hand. I mean, can you imagine that in Jasper, Alabama today? Criticism of the Quran is death to the individual. A non-Muslim who marries a Muslim is death to that individual. A man may marry an infant girl, and I'm talking about a baby, and consummate that marriage when that little girl is 9 years of age. Genital manipulation, or I should say genital mutilation. The clitoris may be cut away to reduce sexual pleasures here. A divorced wife loses custody of all children over the age of 6. It requires testimony of 4 men to prove the rape of a woman. A woman who has been raped cannot testify in court against the rapist. A woman's testimony in court counts only half that of a man. Imagine that in our society today here. Drinkers and gamblers are flogged to death. Husbands can beat their wives. You know what would happen today if a husband beat his wife and that person was turned over to the civil court system? Highway robbers are crucified. Homosexuals are executed. Adulterers are stoned to death or beaten. If you commit adultery, you're buried to your chest, and then you're buried in the earth to your chest, and then you're stoned to death. Anyone that criticizes Muhammad, death to that individual. Death to those who are Muslims and leave the Muslim faith and go to a different type of religion here. So anyway, that is known as Sharia law. I think you'll see that much of that is rather extreme with that too. But again, try to blend that with the American society today. Now, for Islam, Islam is well known in Islamic nations for their unusual architectural structures. We have domes, minarets, twisted columns, horseshoe arches, and let me try to show you some of these too. And it's very beautiful, such as what you're seeing here with these horseshoe arches, the ceilings, buildings such as this, just lavishly painted here, and very beautiful, and quite good artists. Here's other architectural scenes here showing you some horseshoe arches. I failed to find one here that was on twisted columns here. All right, let me share a couple other things with you as we start closing this down. I'm having to flip my page here. And just for your curiosity, you remember the other day we talked about this, that under the Muslim dating system, it's not like AD or BC, we get AH. Ano Hezra is what it is known as here. And I don't think I gave this to you the other day. No, I don't believe I did anyway. But we are currently in the year 1441 Ano Hezra, or AH. Last year it was 1440. The year before that it was also 1440. So you can't really say, you can't just add one to each year. The Hajj for this year, this is the pilgrimage that goes to Mecca, where you have many, many people that will go there, hundreds of thousands, was from 28 July to 2nd of August. I believe I did give this to you the other day. Ramadan in the year 2020 is from the 23rd of April to the 23rd of May. Alrighty, so I want to move on into a different topic here, and this topic deals with Western Christianity. Let me give a little shield up here so you won't get too far ahead of me too. We're in the early Middle Ages. To refresh your memory on this, this is year 600 to the year 1000, and we've talked about the Byzantines and mentioned that of Islam, and now we're going to go into Western Christians. And Western Christians, by the way, were extremely backward in comparison to the Byzantines and to the Muslims. And in the words of one Muslim at that time, they have large bodies, gross natures, harsh manners, and dull intellects, and those who live furthest to the north are particularly stupid, gross, and brutish. I don't know. Maybe things have changed a little bit. I don't know. And I said that tongue in cheek. But anyway, around the year 800, we're going to see a new society, a new civilization of Western Christians to establish itself in the area of where France is located today. They took the name the Franks. The Franks. If we play on that word there, the Franks and France here. They will open up new agricultural lands and adopt Christianity here. They rose to power primarily because when Justinian sent his forces under Belisarius back into the Mediterranean area, this created a power vacuum. And what happens here is the Franks were able to gain control of this. All right, now one of the principal of the Frankish leaders is a person by the name of Clovis. That's the way we pronounce it here in our area. Let's see, I think I have a likeness here showing you Clovis here. Clovis I, a brutal chieftain, and supposedly was the one that took the life of King Alaric too. But Clovis's life was 481 to 511 here. He established a Merovingian society here, developed a close relationship with the Catholic Church. He was baptized. Anyway, and that's Clovis. A popular name here, somewhat popular name here in the South. Now I want you to look at this name here, Clovis. And it's actually the French equivalent to Louis. And so we pronounce it Clovis here, but I think probably in France you hear it pronounced as Clovy. As Clovy. So anyway, and that's Clovis here. Alrighty. And for Clovis will be followed by the next noteworthy figure here, which is Pepin of Heristal. You see a lot of French names here. Pepin. Pepin served, or actually ruled or reigned from 687 to 714. And that is Clovis, that is Pepin of Heristal. He united all Frankish clans under his rule, and for Pepin will be succeeded or followed by his son. And I want you to know this: there are two individuals here that you need to recognize for sure. And the son of Pepin of Heristal is Charles Martel. Now, Charles Martel, who was an illegitimate son, his nickname was Tudites. Some people refer to him as a hammer. Supposedly, that's the way that he would take the life of his enemies. Notice the dates there, 714 to 741, which I do not hold you responsible for that. He distinguished himself in the battle here, and I'm going to pronounce this for you. In this battle that took place in 733, or some people say the battle took place in 744, it's called the Battle of Tours. Now, you do not pronounce the S on the end of Tours. It's just pronounced as the Battle of Tours. And this was a battle that took place about 150 miles south of where Paris is, in which we had large Islamic forces, Muslim forces, had moved into this area, and Charles Martel, the hammer, was able to stop them and defeat them at the Battle of Tours. It is stated that if Charles Martel had lost that battle, then probably much of Europe would have fallen into the hands of the Muslims. Alrighty. Now, Charles Martel also developed a close alliance with the Catholic Church, particularly with the Benedictines, and that under St. Boniface. Now, he'll be followed by Pepin the Short. Now, Pepin the Short And you can see the dates here from 741 to 768. Also maintained a very close relationship with the Catholic Church. And in 751, I want you to just listen to me. In 751, St. Boniface, serving as a divinely approved, serving as a papal emissary, anointed Pepin as a divinely approved king. Pepin, in turn, then provided the Frankish military force for the protection of the Pope. All right, now, Pepin the Short will be followed by his son, Charlemagne. And by the way, there's a good supplemental reading article that you need to address with this. Charlemagne. And Charlemagne is Carolus Magnus. I don't know if I did write. No, I did not write that for you. Carolus Magnus or Charles the Great. If you look at the word Carolingian, that's just a Latinized form of the word for Charles. All right, so Charlemagne established the Carolingian dynasty, or in other words, it's the Charlemagne dynasty. He was a very effective military leader, was able to conquer the lands of where Germany is present today, part of where Poland is present, and of course where France is. You know, some people say that he was the first Holy Roman Emperor. Charlemagne. Now, Charlemagne, when you'll see this when you read through your supplemental reading, Charlemagne always enjoyed talking with foreigners. He never learned to read and write, but he was always in favor of education. Very beautiful children, by the way, too. A number of wives for Charlemagne, a military leader, as I said a few minutes ago. But Charlemagne established the court schools. Let's see if I have this written someplace here. This falls under a heading here, which is called the Carolingian Renaissance. And Renaissance is a word that translates to mean rebirth. Like I said, Charlemagne could never read and write, but he was always interested in education. And what he wanted to do was create schools where monks and where priests could actually learn Latin, where they could study and become more educated with this. All right, and the person that he chose to direct these court schools was a person by the name of Benedictine Alcuin. And I want you to recognize that. Now, it's kind of confusing when you look at this, because when you see the name Alcuin, that's his first name. That is his first name, Alcuin. But he's a Benedictine. He's a Benedictine Catholic. So he is given the name Benedictine Alcuin. Now, also as a part of this, there needed to be an improvement in handwriting. The handwriting, I know you probably have difficulty reading my handwriting here, and I do the best I can with these markers that I use here. But and you'll have to thumb through the pages in your textbook here, folks, to find some examples of this, of Carolingian handwriting. You will not be able to read any of it. It's written in Latin, so you can't read it, but you can see that it's very, very clear print with that. So hence what we refer to it as is that of Roman print. Carolingian handwriting. All right, let's see what else I might have mentioned to you. When Charlemagne died, by the way, he is buried in a church in the German city of Aachen. And I have not been there. I've been to the city of Aachen, but I've not been inside that church to actually view the burial site of Charlemagne. I'll do that, when next time I'm in that area, but at present I've not done that anyway. But when Charlemagne died, he'll be followed by his son, and let me get this down here, who was Louis the Pious from 814 until 840. And he certainly was not the person that Charlemagne was. Very religious, a very pious type person here. Now, when Louis the Pious died, he'll be followed by his three. If you look at a map in your textbook, you can see the three divisions here. Let's see here. Where am I here? And okay, and he'll be followed. I'm down a little bit. I'm telling you, good folks, this is so difficult sometimes when you're looking at all of this upside down. But when Louis Pius died in 840, he'll be followed by his three sons here, and this will be Charles the Bald, Lothar, and Ludwig. And look at the map in your textbook, and you see the areas that they controlled. Actually, Charles the Bald was more like where France is located today. Lothar is in the area which is kind of what you would say would be West Germany, and then Ludwig here is in the area which is Central Germany, parts of Poland. Look at the name Ludwig. Ludwig's common German name here, Louis, Ludwig, Ludwig. All right. And with this, dividing Charlemagne's kingdom into these three major areas, it made it very difficult to control all of those areas. And the enemies of the Franks will turn upon them. Those enemies will include such nationalities here as the Vikings. So you can imagine the Vikings, which are coming out of the areas of like Norway and Iceland, and they were go along the French coastline and enter into the many rivers there along the French Atlantic coastline, and just take their longboats, sail up those rivers, and just cause a lot of just destruction. Now, you may not be familiar with this next group, which are called the Magyars. The Magyars, which are actually those people from Hungary. And when you visit Hungary today, and this photograph was taken in Budapest, and I'll tell you more about Budapest at a later time. We don't need to waste our time on it today anyway. But if you go to an area in Budapest, which is called Hero Square, and here this represents here all these statues are these war heroes, these war figures that were all Magyar heroes of that time, Magyar war leaders. These are all Hungarians. So this group now will be coming from the east, and they're very warlike, and of course this is going to be a threat to the Frankish Empire and will lead to the crumbling of that. And in addition to that, we also had the Muslims which are coming in from the south. So we had these three groups here, the Vikings, the Magyars, and the Muslims, definitely going to be a threat to the Frankish Empire. All right, let's see what else I might mention to you here. Some of the other significant individuals from this period of time. One individual, Alfred the Great. Did I write the dates here? And I did not for Alfred the Great. This is in the year 800s here. But for Alfred the Great, he was able to accomplish a number of things in bringing England into a more advanced state, if you will. He founded new schools, he codified English laws, established court schools, and he brought about an interest in just Anglo-Saxon writing, Alfred the Great. All right. Another individual, and I'm kind of fond of this individual here. The person's name is Otto the Great. Otto, of course, indicates that it's a German name, Otto the Great. He assumed rule as king in 936. He later became an emperor in 957, I believe it was anyway. He carried the sacred lance of Charlemagne, supposedly anyway, Otto the Great here. And anyway, and let's see, do I need to mention to you something else about Otto the Great? And I believe I'm okay with that. All right. You got to realize that in this year, 936, that Germany's not been created. Germany is just made up of a great number of those, like city-states and provinces and that sort of thing. Germany became a country, a recognized country in the year 1871. If you stay with me next semester, we'll talk about the development of Germany, development of Italy. Now, I want to spend just a couple of seconds with that sacred lance that I mentioned to you a few seconds ago. And I cannot completely verify any of this, but like I said, supposedly Otto the Great came in possession, Otto the Great came in possession of this sacred lance of Charlemagne. And this sacred lance, supposedly anyway, was a lance that Longinus, and Longinus was a Roman centurion, a Roman soldier that used to pierce the body of Jesus when Jesus was suffering and dying on the cross. And so the sacred lance developed magical powers with it. And what many people believe that whoever is in possession of that sacred lance can never be defeated. And so anyway, it went into the possession here of Otto the Great, Otto the First, and subsequently fell into the hands of the Habsburgs. And we'll talk a lot about the Habsburgs later in this semester anyway. And then when Adolf Hitler came to power, and supposedly he took possession of the sacred lance of the country that can never be defeated with that. And then towards the end of the war, it didn't work that way. And the way the stories go anyway is the sacred lance was buried in a vault, and U.S. soldiers actually found that, and that the sacred lance is in the hands of the United States government today here. Other individuals will tell you no, that the sacred lance is present in St. Peter's Basilica, that is present in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Jesus supposedly was crucified, and some people will tell you that it is in Hofburg Museum, which is present in Vienna, Austria today. So I really don't know about that, but it makes a quite good story with that. Let's go back to our camera here as we move right along with this. Okay, now, of this period of time in the early Middle Ages, we do not have a lot of written records from that period of time. Like I said, Europe was very backward. They were quite backward. Most of you probably are familiar with the fascinating story of Beowulf, and I like this story very, very much here. Some of you probably are familiar with that, in fighting demons and fighting sea monsters, and you've probably had that before, in some of your literature courses with that, maybe even in high school. Another thing that came out in this period of time was that of the Book of Kells. The Book of Kells is an illuminated gospel manual. And did I write that out for you? I did. Illuminated Gospel Book. The Book of Kells is housed today in Trinity College, which is present in Dublin, Ireland. It's a beautiful, beautiful college campus there. It looks nothing like any of our college campuses here. But if you go inside the library there, you'll have to buy a ticket to do so. And it's not open to the public unless you buy the ticket. And a lot of history there, but you'll see some of these preservations here. And these are just photographs out of the pages there of this illuminated gospel book from the Book of Kells. Here's another one here. And I've just got a couple of pages here that you can actually look at here. Just a masterful piece of work that dates back into the 700s, All right. Anyway. All right. And let's see here. One final note on this topic here, folks, as we start to close this out. One individual, and I should have probably mentioned his name a little bit earlier, and in fact it just slipped my mind and I penciled this in just a few minutes ago, was Venerable Bede. If you can't read my writing here, this is B-E-D-E. He bears a title today, Saint Bede, Venerable Bede, and he wrote this piece, which was one of the greatest accounts of life in England in the early Middle Ages, and it's called The History of the English Church and People. History of the English Church and People. And I wish that you would actually remember that here about Venerable Bede. All right, we're going to move out of this area here, and I want to tie this up before we're completely out of the early Middle Ages here. I mentioned to you about, go back to religion for just a second here, and you probably are familiar with the great Latin fathers, and I've told you at an earlier time of the great Latin fathers, we had St. Jerome and St. Ambrose and St. Augustine, and now we have the fourth one here, and this is Pope Gregory. Pope Gregory the First, or sometimes referred to as St. Gregory the Great. You can see the years. It says pontificate when he was the Pope is 590 to 604, and as I wrote here, he was the fourth, the Latin great fathers. But he changed a lot of things within the church. He brought about a more secure, more independent Catholic church. He developed several things here, one of which is called penance. And penance, which is it consists of 4 parts. And this is part of the sacraments of the Catholic Church here, of confession, penance itself, submission to the satisfaction here, and absolution by a priest. And when you start with confession, this is when you confess your sins. You go into the church or the cathedral. The priest is in there in a confession booth, and you enter into the booth, not in the same booth, of course, here, and you make the sign of the cross, which is done here. I'll try to move my camera down a little bit, which is done with the right hand, in which you begin with the forehead to the chest, to the right shoulder, and then to the left shoulder, and to the right shoulder here. It's done like this. All right. If you're in the eastern parts, like Eastern Orthodox, eastern parts of Europe, it's done in the fashion that is just opposite of that, such as here to here, then over to the right, and then over to the left. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. And then you confess your sins, and then you have submission to the satisfaction, and where the priest will say something to the effect like, say 3 Hail Marys, and 3 Hail Marys full of grace, and you do that, and then the priest will absolve you of your sins. He'll say, God is now forgiven your sins, go in peace. All right, so anyway, and that's one of the things that that St. Gregory the Great introduced into the church. He also introduced another concept here of purgatory, and this is a place for the atonement of the sins. So if an individual passes away, your soul does not go directly to heaven, but you go to an intermediary area for the purging of your sins, and this is called purgatory. And you spend a period of time in purgatory for the atonement of your sins until your soul moves into heaven. He also introduced another how shall I put this, a Gregorian chant into the Catholic Church. If you were in my classroom right now, I'd be playing some Gregorian chants to you, but I do not have any kind of playing device here that will allow me to do that for just a few seconds here. So you just have to look that up on your own devices here. Take Dr. Stahl Smith's music course and you'll get well familiar with it. But it's just kind of a haunting sing-song chant or hum. If you spend any time within a monastery, you know exactly what I'm talking about with that. Personally, I find it to be agreeable to my listening taste with that. All right, so anyway, and that's Pope Gregory the Great, St. Gregory the Great. All right, so let's move right along, and I want to move into this area here, the High Middle Ages, for a period of time. And these years, to refresh your memory, is that of 1000 to 1300. During this time, we're going to see fantastic European developments. Europe is going to come out of the Dark Ages here, and it's going to be a very, very nice period of time. One of the things associated with this was an agricultural revolution. An agricultural revolution here. I use this word in my class and get a lot of laughs out of this. This is a period of time, it's the man with a hoe. It is. It's the man with a hoe. In fact, I heard somebody talking about that the other day. He said, "Look at that man with a hoe," and I think he was a pretty good farmer, as a matter of fact. Now, some of the things that you're going to see here in this period of time, we're going to see agricultural production to actually double. It honestly will. From 700 to 1050, agricultural production will double. We get new farming techniques here. And really from the year 1050 to 1250, agricultural production will triple or even quadruple at that time. It was an ideal growing season in Europe. And Europe has great soil from the southern parts of England to France to Germany on into Poland. You just could not have better farming land there. I lived there. I lived in central parts of Germany, and I know exactly what I'm talking about. We had many, many farms that were present there. And it was during the Charlemagne time is that land was actually open to agricultural production. We had temperatures that were slightly warmer, about 1 degree, 2 degrees Celsius, slightly less rainfall during that period of time, and it just produced ideal growing conditions here. See, folks, we've had global warming for a long, long time, and we haven't gone away yet. And I think we're going to be here for many, many, many thousands of more years, too. All right, so anyway, let's go back to my document camera here. And this was a time, and what I recommend that you do here, folks, if you're looking in your textbook on page 256 in your textbook, you can visualize some of the things I'm talking about. Back in the Roman times, we used the old Roman scratch plow, but now we're going to move into the use of the heavy plow. It'll help if you use your textbook where the man with a hoe can actually put his full weight onto the plow itself, and this allows you to dig much deeper than just having a scratch plow that scratches the surface of the earth. You always have a problem with birds, so the deeper that you can plant your seeds, it gives them more protection there from the predatory birds. All right, we also had a 3-field system of crop rotation, and this was another innovation that came out during this period. 3-field system of crop rotation. Let me show you what I'm talking about with this, and I think I have it illustrated over here. And you kind of have to use your own imagination on this, but what you're going to do, you're going to take your land and you divide it into thirds. And instead of just going out and taking all your land and planting it with one crop here, we're going to take the land and we're going to and third it. And for 1/3 of the land, we're going to leave it with no planting whatsoever. This is called keeping it fallow, F-A-L-L-O-W. And here we're going to take our beast of prey, our beast of burden, and place them in this area so that they can fertilize this area. And then we're going to take another area and use this area for fall planting. for fall planting, such as this. And we take another area and we use it for spring planting here. And what this does, this prevents soil depletion. And then each year we rotate. And we rotate it such as the fall planting here will now go to fallow land, and then the fallow land will go to spring. You'll kind of get the idea of what I'm talking about. You just rotate it around like that. And like I said, to use the same word redundantly, it prevents soil depletion. All right, so that was a major innovation that's going to take place during this period of time. Some of the other things that we'll see that will come out of this period, we'll see mills. I'm talking about water mills, spinning mills will come out of this period of time. The padded collar happens to be something else. This protects the shoulders of the beast of burden. Iron horseshoes to protect the hoof. We have tandem harnessing, and at first it was harnessing one behind the other, then it was harnessing side by side, more effective with that. During this period, we also see the emergence of wheelbarrows, a harrow. If you don't know what a harrow is it's kind of like it looks like a comb for the hair, except it's much longer than that, and it's used for when you dig a furrow, when you plow and dig a furrow and plant the seeds, then the harrow pulls the earth back over the planted seeds. Iron sickles, iron scythes will all come out during this period of time. All right, let's take a few minutes here, and I want to try to address another topic before we run out of time today. And this is a topic here that's going to deal with a manorial system or a manor. Now, a manor is an estate. So you imagine that the person that owns the manor, that is the lord. All right, now, manorialism is an economic system. It's a little bit confusing here. When I was taking this course a jillion years ago, we used what was called feudalism as the term. And we still have feudalism, but we changed that term today in the economic pretense of this to use the term manorialism for that. Now, it consists of several different groups. We have the free peasants, and you also have the serfs. The free peasants and the serfs. Then I'm making an illustration I did. I'm going to come to that illustration in a few minutes. All right, we'll try to keep this straight with this. For the free peasants are not slaves, they're not serfs, and they live on the Lord's land. They pay rents to the Lord. They plant their own crops. They can use their own crops after they're harvested. They can sell any excess that you might have. And you can even leave the land. You can leave the manor if you wish to do so, as long as you have somebody else that will come in and take your land and live on your land. The reason for that is you have to pay rents to the Lord. And then we have different here. We have the serfs. Now, the serfs are tied to the land. The serfs cannot leave their land. In fact, you're serf by birthright. Your parents were serfs, your grandparents are serfs, your great-grandparents were serfs. You cannot leave the land. You're bound to the land. You're subject to the Lord's jurisdiction here. You have to pay your taxes here. You can be fined for fornication. You can be fined for marriage. You can be fined for dying. And my students always open their eyes and say, how can you be fined for dying? That means your family has to pay because of the lost productivity that the serf no longer could provide for the Lord. Now, if we break this down, for the Lord's land, which is the Lord has his demesne. Now, that's the Lord's land itself. All right, so I've tried to illustrate this for you so you can kind of understand this. And we'll say that this part is the Lord's demesne that's present here. Now, for the serfs are required to work on the Lord's demesne 3 or 4 days a week. In other words, they can work on their own land a couple of days a week, maybe 3 days a week, but they also have to go work the fields up on the Lord's demesne. The free peasants don't have to do that. The free peasants can work their own lands here. There's a portion of the manor which is always reserved for hunting. And think in your mind here, Robin Hood, where we had the Lord's hunting lands there. And Robin Hood and the merry men would always go out and hunt on the Lord's land, and that's illegal to do so. The serfs and the free peasants cannot hunt on the Lord's land. That's reserved for the aristocracy. All right, so anyway, that kind of gives you an idea about this. Now, for the way of life with serfs, it is unpleasant at best. They have crudely built houses. They're made of wattle. This is like taking braided sticks and weaving them together and plastering over them with mud. It's not a very good way of life. Now, to tell you about this, and I don't mean to get down this far here, like I said, for serfs and for free peasants, life is poor at best here. We had dirt floors, beds are cushioned with ferns, there's practically no furniture there. Cooking utensils are never washed. The basic diet, might be soup that looked like porridge, or porridge that looked like soup, something on that order here. Perhaps you've heard this before: peas porridge hot, peas porridge cold, peas porridge in the pot, 9 days old. Here, the basic diet was a thin soup made of onions, turnips, peas, cabbage, a lot of bread in the diet, a lot of beer in the diet, and very little in the way of meats there. Meats were reserved for these seasonal times, such as Christmas and that sort of thing. And let me close out here. I want to get this off our plate today here, folks. And another term that we use is that of feudalism. Now, feudalism, this was a term I used, or my professors taught me when I was taking this course, but feudalism is extreme decentralization. This is where the public rights of minting, justice, military, and taxation are all placed in the hands of private lords. So this means that on a lord's domain, the making of money, the administering of justice, providing a military for the area, and taxation for that area is all done by the Lord itself here. All right. And I think for right now here, folks, I'm going to stop our lecture for the time being. I'm in a pretty good stopping place. I don't want to go into talking about chivalry, talking about knights right at this very moment, and we'll save that to the next time that we are together. Don't forget, you have an examination coming up very shortly here, folks. All right. Thank you very much.